In parts 1 through 3, we covered a lot of ground, discussing how water moves underground and why it does so, how it comes to the surface and impacts landscapes, how and why springs form where they do, as well as more extreme cases like geysers and hot springs and the minerals that get left behind by the flow of water through these systems. Today we're going to be talking about systems like ours, limestone systems, and I use the term ours very confidently because limestone is so ubiquitous around the world that at least 90% of you either live on limestone or within driving distance of a limestone. We're going to look at how groundwater creates cave systems, sinkholes, and some of the most gorgeous landscapes on Earth. I'm Craig the geologist. Come learn about it with me. Now in my Great Lakes area here, these are the rocks that we see most often. This is limestone. Limestone is very easy to dissolve in water. Now, I mean, you can't just put it in a glass of water and watch it melt away, but it only takes a very, very tiny amount of acidity in the water to dissolve a limestone over the course of tens of thousands of years. And that's precisely what happens in these limestone environments. In an earlier video, I took you out to Rockport and showed you the sinkholes out there. And those sinkholes reveal places where cave systems have collapsed underground. And those cave systems today are beneath the water table. But at previous times in Earth's history, probably just a few thousand years in our region, the lake level was significantly lower. And so those caves were being eroded by flowing groundwater beneath the surface. The acidity in that groundwater doesn't need to come from anything exotic. In fact, most often it simply comes from organic material at the surface breaking down, creating tannic acids and biological acids that I don't really pretend to be an expert about. But basically, organics breaking down and the surface being dissolved by the water gives that water just enough acidity to cut its way through the limestone. Now, an interesting thing happens when you have these cave systems forming. It starts, we have a land surface here, and water percolates down into the limestone. And you get these little pockets of dissolution forming inside the limestone. Nothing terribly dramatic. But then these pockets start to join up together and you end up with these cave systems. And if you've ever visited a cave, you know that doesn't tend to be just one giant hole in the ground. It tends to be a lot of interconnected caverns. And that's because these all started as individual dissolution pockets. These are individual cavities that formed that became linked together, and the water begins flowing through these. And of course, once the water's moving, things start to really speed up, and you end up with a more complicated cave system here. And there might be a tiny passage here that spelunkers have to squeeze through. But now we've got an area here filled with water, and this water is booking it. Well, I'm at a gorgeous little spot here in northern Michigan. This is known as the underground Akiak. There is the Akiak River, the Little Akiak River, and Akiak Falls, which is a beautiful set of waterfalls that are just a lot of fun to swim in. But here we've got the underground Akiak. Underground for a good reason. There's no river on one side of the road, and on the other, there is. Let's have a look. So we've got no river at all on one side of the road. Just have a look and confirm that. But here we are on the other. And a river comes out of nowhere. Let's see exactly where it's coming from. That is not a little culvert or pipe under the road. That's an actual spring. Standing directly over the spring, and the water is flowing out just beneath my feet. Let's come over here, get a different angle on this. But this is not the only spring in the area. This is all referred to as the underground Akiak Springs, but the water comes out of the ground in a handful of places here. Some places it comes out more energetically, and others it's a bit calmer. We'll take a little walk downstream here. You see this beautiful little braided channel here, little islands of forest. All right, now it's time for that $1,000,000 question. Is it safe to drink? Can you just scoop a handful of artesian spring water and drink it without getting sick? Well, the answer is yes and no. I don't believe in simple answers. There really aren't any in this world. The answer is yes, because artesian waters are some of the cleanest in the world. There are exceptions, of course, but generally right where it comes out of the ground, it's been purified by moving through the earth for weeks, months, years, centuries, in some places millions of years. Here, probably months to years. But that ground has done an excellent job of filtering the water. There's no bacteria in it. It's safe to drink. However, within about a quarter second of reaching the surface, it can instantly have giardia and all the other nasty stuff that you don't want to be ingesting, mixing in with it. So is it safe to drink the water? The water is safe the instant it leaves the earth in an artesian spring. However, the moment it touches the rest of the stream water, unfortunately, pretty much every stream in North America, and as far as I know, really pretty much the whole planet, except for maybe Antarctica, has been contaminated with giardia and similar other nasties that you don't want to be drinking. So the water is safe for a split second, but by the time you reach your hand in to scoop some up, it could have nasty stuff in it. So save yourself a trip to the hospital and don't start drinking it. Artesian well water, on the other hand, hasn't been mixed with other stuff that's got giardia and nasties in it. And so that is usually very, very clean and very safe to drink. But it's the act of mixing with the river water that makes it unsafe to drink artesian spring water. You could try some and be perfectly fine, but I want to recommend that all of you don't, because I don't want anyone to be watching this video and end up going to the hospital because of something I said. So play it safe. If you want beautiful artesian spring water, go to the store and buy a bottle of the stuff that markets itself as such. that will be purified and safe to drink. On the topic of water moving very rapidly through caves and cavern systems to flow out as fast-moving springs, can the opposite happen? Can a river that is on the surface flow into a cave and go underground? Well, the answer is yes, at least in one place. This is the Poposha River in Wyoming near Landers, and this is a location called Sinks Canyon State Park. Now, the Poposha River is actually written as though it were Popo Aggie, but it's pronounced Poposha. The Poposha River has been flowing over land like a normal river for miles and miles and miles. You can see it's quite a large river. But at this location, it encounters a cave and drops underground. It drops underground at a location called the Sinks, and it pops back up at a location called the Rise. And it's quite interesting to see this river just bubbling from the ground. Now, I mentioned that the river travels several miles underground, and yet the Rise, where it comes up, is only a quarter mile away from the Sinks. So what's with the discrepancy? Well, they did dye tests, and that water that at the entrance to the Sinks is traveling, dozens of miles an hour. It is just flying through there. It takes 2 hours to travel that quarter mile. It is certainly not a straight line journey. That river takes a long winding path to travel that quarter mile. All right, let's return to that lecture. But dissolution doesn't stop at that point. It continues to dissolve and dissolve and dissolve. And you can end up with a situation where the top of the cave comes perilously close to the surface of the land, and it just becomes a little bit too thin. What happens? Well, you have a collapse. And you've got a sinkhole right there. This is what happens at Rockport. This is what you see happening in Florida all the time. Florida has a lot of limestone and a very high water table, and there are a lot of caves just beneath the surface that are not well mapped out or understood. And what happens is people build a house, and oh gee, turns out the house added a little bit too much weight to this very thin layer of land that's over top of a cave we didn't know about. Bam, the house falls in, the parked car falls in, whatever is up there falls into the new sinkhole, and you've made the evening news. Over time, you can end up with an entire landscape of sinkholes where you have more sinkhole than old land. All right. This is a situation where the land surface used to be up here. This is called a karst environment, and these are some of the most beautiful, exotic landscapes on the planet Earth. They're spectacularly beautiful. And they're what happens when these cave networks become so advanced that the land is 90% sinkhole and 10% original land surface. Do I have an example of a karst to show you? Well, of course I do. And it is maybe the most beautiful karst environment on our whole planet. This is Yangshuo County in Guilin in China. And I'm traveling along the Yulong River for these early photos. And yes, it's photographs again. This stuff was recorded at a time when I thought one day I would be giving lectures in a lecture hall using a slideshow of still photos rather than doing video. And so there's very little video and a lot of photos. The Yulong River winds its way through this karst topography, and adds an extra element of erosion to this already starkly dramatic erosional environment, where it's going along these karst structures and it's cutting them and slicing right through them, limestone being a relatively soft rock. If you ever do make it out there, and I sincerely hope you do, you can get on these boat tours, and this tour will be one of the most amazing experiences of your life, especially if you're a geology nerd. And if you're watching my channel, I assume you are. What I'd like to point out, though, for these karst structures here, is that the active geologic part isn't the tower of rock, it's the space in between. The tops of these towers of rock haven't changed much. They just represent the ancient land surface, where all the flat land used to be. All the empty space in between, all the low-lying areas, like where I'm taking these photos from and going on this boat tour, this is the old system of caves and sinkholes that have all just eroded out to create a new land surface. These karsts are not fully divorced from their cave history either. You can see stalactite-like structures dangling from the overhangs on them. As you wind your way out of the karst system, you'll watch the geology change to layered sedimentary rocks that are more likely to be sandstones, and you'll see they're heavily folded. But now we're getting away from our topic area. Are there still caves in the Yangshuo karst region? Yes, there's over 1,000 of them. And the most popular and biggest by far is Silver Cave. You can go there and visit and tour it for yourself, but fair warning, it is extremely crowded, extremely touristy. You will be packed in shoulder to shoulder like sardines as you make your way through. I get a little bit claustrophobic. There were signs asking people to stop pooping in the cave. I asked my wife if that was a mistranslation, and she said, no, apparently there's a problem with people pooping in the cave. They've got these colored lights up because apparently the natural formations are too boring for people. I am extremely negative about the cave, but if you don't have a lot of experience with caves, you might enjoy the experience. This amazing topography isn't just along the Yulong River either. It takes up a majority of Yangshuo County. In North America, we have pretty much every geologic and natural environment on Earth, but we don't have a gorgeous karst location like this. A place where the ancient land surface has eroded away to create a new one, leaving behind pillars of land that have been there for millions of years. A landscape where millions of people still live to this day and barely even look up to notice the gorgeous scenes around them because it's just their everyday view. Where for a local, the karst might represent more of a hassle, where you have to carve roads into the side of them just to be able to get around. If you ever do make your way to China, and I sincerely hope you do, Guilin and Yangshuo, that's a must-visit location as far as I'm concerned. This is just an otherworldly environment. You feel like you're on a different planet. One other way in which it's awfully interesting, though, is to think of this as maybe a vision into the future of Michigan and some other Great Lakes and international limestone environments, where the ground surface is pretty plain and boring, but we're starting to get sinkholes and cave networks forming right now. A million years into the future, are we going to look like Yangshuo? Well, maybe. And as we return to the lecture, let me leave you with this photo of me on a moped with my son, with a look that can only be described as badass. And eventually, everything just dissolves away, and eventually you'll end up, a billion years from now with a very boring landscape again. But for a brief period in time, that karst landscape is spectacularly beautiful. And with that, we'll pause, but I hope you'll join me for the next episode when we discuss artesian systems, places where the groundwater is pressurized and comes rocketing up to the surface on its own power. It's going to be really interesting. I'll see you next time.